and doubling our efforts to stem carjackings in the city with precision deployments of the community safety team. This is part of our strategy to continue our focus on gangs, guns, and drugs, with an emphasis on people, places, and behaviors that drive both violence and public disorder in our neighborhoods. The precision deployment of the Community Safety Team, or CST, entails the following: a Community Safety Team precision deployment to Area 1 homicide, a CST precision deployment to the Carjacking Task Force, a CST precision deployment to gang investigations, CST precision deployment to our Narcotics division, maintaining a community safety team citywide, a community safety team area 1 through 5, deployment to focus on specific neighborhood violence and public disorder in our neighborhoods, and finally, a community safety team intelligence work group focused on our data-driven deployments and investigations. We'll have several comments today from various people on our leadership team. First up will be Bureau of Detectives Chief Brendan Dinahan. Next will be Deputy Chief Gilberto Calderon, then Deputy Director Elena Gottridge, followed by Deputy Chief Daniel O'Shea, and then I'll come back for a few questions.
Hi, Brendan Dinahan, Chief of Detectives. As the superintendent mentioned, he's adding 40 community safety officers to the hijacking teams, and that's specifically to help the detectives with these hijacking cases. So we talk a lot about hijackings, and the detectives are doing a great job along with all the officers. It's not just these 40 officers. Every time a hijacking occurs, obviously the beat officers respond, and the district officers with all the technology. We talk about these situational rooms and our license plate readers. So really, it's the entire police department is always working on these carjackings. But as the superintendent mentioned, he's adding 40 additional bodies to precisely focus on carjackings. And currently, year to date, there's been 948 arrests for carjackings, and then more importantly, 223 for vehicular hijacking. And that's a pretty big increase from last year. It's a 69% increase from the arrests last year, which were 132. And then if you look back to 2019, there were 83 arrests. So when you compare it to 2019, it's a 169% increase. And the reason this is important is because the detectives working with the state's attorney's office have to get that highest charge for vehicular hijacking in order to hold these people accountable in a court of law. So these additional officers, as the superintendent mentioned, are going to help focus on this, and then working with, they're going to talk about our gang teams and the criminal networks, because a lot of these individuals carjack cars, they commit robberies, and working very closely with our partners in criminal networks will help kind of solidify and bond these our units together to solve some of these crimes. So I'll pass it over to Deputy Chief Calderon at this time.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gilberto Calderon. I am the Deputy Chief of Gang Investigations. As the Superintendent Brown just mentioned, we're going to move in a big picture with a total holistic strategy approach to get rid of gangs, guns, and drugs that drive the violence in our communities. Our Gang Investigation Unit will focus on high-level investigations, aiming at taking down criminal organizations that drive the gun violence throughout our city. The strategy will work hand-in-hand with our new gun unit that has just been implemented a few months ago that are focusing on gun traffickers, straw purchasers, who are providing firearms to the drivers of violence that are committing violent acts in our communities. But dismantling these violent gangs is just one step in our strategy. We're also committed to developing partnerships, stronger partnerships, with our neighborhoods affecting gang members in our communities. We're going to be able to take our officers that are going to be formed into new oriented sustainability teams who will close hand in hand with our communities that are being affected by gun violence. These teams, these officers are going to be working with the community to sustain those neighborhoods that are being affected by gun violence after we take these gang members off the street. And what they're going to do, they're going to work hand in hand with our faith-based organizations, our outreach organizations, our aldermen, our businesses, so that we can find methods and we have honest communication with our neighborhoods to see what we can come up with solutions to maintain and keep those neighborhoods safe. I will turn it over now to Director Elena Godrich.
Good afternoon. I'm Elena Gottridge, Deputy Director of Prosecutorial Strategies and also the new gun investigation teams. Chicago police are moving to a holistic strategy. Our number one priority is to keep our community members safe. Oftentimes we think of shooting victims and homicide victims as statistics, as the numbers that we read in the newspapers every Monday. That's not how we work, and that's not how we operate. Everybody is a life lost or a life diminished. All of those people are members of our communities. To that end, our strategy is to use complex narcotics investigations, complex gang investigations, and complex gun investigations to target the traffickers and the most violent gang members to dismantle those operations from the top down. We are moving away from the mass incarceration policies of the past and being more strategic and thoughtful with our investigations. The new strategies you'll hear about today, as Deputy Chief Calderon stated, will work hand in hand and collaboratively with the work already being done by the gun unit. The gun unit, as you've heard before, is targeting the high-level offenders, those that are perpetuating the violence in our city, the straw purchasers and the gun traffickers. They are the ones providing these weapons of mass destruction to our communities. Since we announced the gun investigation teams, we have already investigated dozens of straw purchasers and traffickers. We have recovered guns from people with revoked FOID cards. Some of those revocations were due to domestic violence convictions, sex offense convictions, and violent convictions. Those are guns that were taken out of the hands of people that should not have had them and preventing future stories about people shot and or murdered. Those guns included assault rifles, shotguns, and pistols. We're confident that with this new holistic strategy, we can build off strategies that worked in the past and really take our policing to the next century with our main focus being the community. I will turn it over to Deputy Chief O'Shea.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dan O'Shea. I'm the Deputy Chief of the Narcotics Unit. So the mission of the Narcotics Unit is to support, obviously, the Chicago Police Department's commitment to protect the lives, property, and rights of all people, and to maintain order and enforce laws impartially. So the Narcotics Unit is going to focus on a strategic, proactive, investigative strategy to continue and intensify intelligence-based complex narcotics investigations against drug trafficking organizations that are engaged in violence in our communities. The battles over drug selling corners and customers is a major driver in parts of our city. Oftentimes, innocent people are the victims of this violence. So by dismantling these drug trafficking organizations, the Narcotics Unit can provide the community with safer streets and put a dent in the opioid epidemic that's ravishing our city. And just a little backstory on that, I know it hasn't been in the spotlight, but according to the Chicago Department of Public Health website, 467 people have died from opioid overdoses in the first half of 2021. So that's an average of about 20 people a week. And we hope to make a significant impact in people's lives with this strategy. Thank you.
Before we take questions, I just want to make sure we got the top line right. We're going after gangs. That's the top line for this presser. We're going after gangs. And I said what I said. We're going after gangs. And we're going to do it constitutionally. We're going to make sure we don't violate anyone's rights. But gangs are out of control in this city. And we're going after them to hold them accountable. And with that, I'll take a few questions. Yes. So you don't have to take too much time to find out the answer to your question. If you live in the city of Chicago, if you talk to anyone living in a neighborhood inundated with violence, you would immediately find that answer. Gangs contribute to not only the violence in a significant way, but also the public disorder. Again, the question is well taken, but it's a little bit of we know what the problems are in this city, and it's high time we said gangs are a significant scourge to the safety of our neighborhoods, and we're going to use every resource we have to take these criminal networks down. Can I address this in a longer answer? One is, yes, the gangs are structured much different than they maybe were in the 1990s, but that shouldn't prohibit us from going after them. There are parent gangs still, like the 1990s, so there are some gangs that are structured in similar ways than they were in the 90s with clear leadership. Then there are other gangs that are in factions of a parent gang. And then there's another level, there's a third level, tertiary groups who are crews and maybe factions of the faction of the gang, and likely have internal conflicts with their parent gang. And so yes, it's a very complex system. Then the complexity of these criminal networks really leads us to being more data-driven, intelligence-led, both deployments around interdicting the violence and also the investigations. So I think the precursor to addressing the complexity of what is the new gang structure, both parent gang, faction of the gang, and maybe just a crew that has a gang name, have to be led by intelligence and data, which, again, no one's asked this question, so the old gang database that went to the Criminal Enterprise Information System is still in process. All the names have been vetted. There are some process steps related to appeal at the police board that has yet to be completed in the political realm, but in the next few weeks we hope to have that Criminal Enterprise Information System online and working to inform us as we deploy and investigate gangs and other criminal networks. Do you have a follow-up? Not just that. Someone who believes they're on our Criminal Enterprise Information System erroneously, they have an appeal process that goes before the police board that's outside the police department. It's an independent board that's outside the police department to appeal and make their case to come off of the Criminal Enterprise Information System. That's yet in process to be done, but that's the finality of what needs to be done for us to have this new information system working to inform us on our deployments and investigations around gangs. Yes? Sure. No, I would answer that in this way. If you think about the gang life, it's about the stuff. If you look on any gang members' social media, they're flashing the guns, they're flashing money, they're flashing this lifestyle that gets cars and jewelry, and it glamorizes this lifestyle. And it's very influential to a young person who's trying to decide, what life course to take. So it is a very strategic move that the city has taken, which I fully support, to basically take their stuff, take the glamour off of being in a gang. It is one of the things that drives this lifestyle being something that maybe some very young, influential people admire. It should not be admired. The ill-gotten gains of gang membership is blood money. It's killed our young people. It's taken their lives much too soon. It's incarcerated much too many people of color being influenced and by this lifestyle being something that should be glamored and admired. But when you take their stuff away, it leaves them with basically who they are as people without all this stuff to glamorize this lifestyle. So it is an important strategy, and it's one we fully support. All hands on deck, Mary. State's attorney, U.S. attorney, and the city attorneys all need to go after gangs. There's room at the table for our efforts to take down gangs. If we just, I'll come back to that last at the end and maybe even offline. I want to stay on topic. If we have any other questions on topic, we'd like to answer those, and then we'll take those at the end, or we'll take them offline about recruiting, which is a priority as well. Yes. We have. So I think one of the prominent words I use in this presser is precision deployment. The complexity of what has been asked here about gangs are so much different than they were. The structure is not as clean as it had been maybe in the 90s. Leads us to everything we do has to be data-driven. We fully understand the constitutionality of focusing on people without the supportive data for our investigative and deployment and enforcement efforts. Thus, the criminal enterprise information system had to be further along for us to be able to execute in this area, to implement this fully from a precision, data-driven, intelligence-led standpoint. We are just a few weeks away from that fully being ready to utilize, and we're starting our efforts now to take down gangs, but it is not just our instincts or some officers' thoughts about whether this person is a gang member or not. It is a fully vetted, with an ability to appeal your way off of this gang if you feel like you are on this information system erroneously. And if those who are left on this information system will be pursued because it has been vetted, it is transparent, but any and all who feel like they're erroneously on have a way to get off, which is something that has been in the works, but we're nearing finality on this as soon as, I believe there's a couple of council hearings for this to be approved, for the police board to be the agency that hears the appeal. As soon as that's done, we'll be furthering our investigations. So yes, we've always focused on gangs broadly. This is precision, using a scalpel in the most complex ways to pursue criminal networks that drive violence in this city. Last question. So I just want to repeat what we've said here, because it refutes everything you just said as incorrect. So the community safety team has and was created to create relationships in the community, as well as focus on gang, guns, and drugs, and people that in places that drive violence. That is accurate, and they'll continue that work. We've said nothing here about their precision deployment that discontinues their work in the community. And if you heard Deputy Chief Calderon correctly when he talked about there's a component to their gang investigation that sustains the areas where the gang takedowns happen through involvement with the community to hold those areas once the gangs have been taken down. So it is an expansion of the work that the community safety team originally did to include a community safety team, community involvement, integration with the gang investigations, which is a new feature that we didn't have before. So it continues with my thoughts about community policing. As long as community policing is just in CAPS or some work group, and they're the only people in the whole community that does that, then you're not really a community-oriented policing organization. You've set that aside to just a small work group. It was my concern with the saturation team, the gang enforcement teams, the gun teams we had no community service component at all. And I thought that was short-sighted. I believe every member of this police department needs to be involved in some type of community engagement for us to really gain the trust of people in the community. It shouldn't be just a small work group of CAPS members only doing community engagement. So this continues our focus on being a community-oriented policing organization where every effort, this precision deployment and other investigations that we do, always involve a community engagement component, always. So please don't write something different, because that's not what we said here. These cops will be precision deployed, but will continue their community engagement efforts. They'll all be in the areas. They'll be assigned to the neighborhoods. They'll be assigned to area 1 through 5 so that we can push their integration, push their structure, as well as their day-to-day operations closer to the neighborhoods, to work with those community members as we take down these gangs. Thank you all so much.